May 28, 1944. The Hampshire countryside stretched green and endless beneath a sky that couldn't decide between rain and mercy. Private First Class Daniel Reeves sat on his footlocker in a tent that smelled of canvas, tobacco, and the particular kind of sweat that comes from knowing you're about to cross an ocean towards something terrible. In his hands, he held 3 letters. Not letters he'd written, letters he'd received. The paper had gone soft from being folded and unfolded, read and reread until the creases threatened to tear through his wife Margaret's handwriting. The ink had smudged in places where his thumbs had worried the edges during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come. Around him, the encampment hummed with the controlled chaos of preparation. Thousands of men packed into southern England, all waiting for weather reports and coded signals. Everyone knew something massive was coming. The brass didn't have to say it. You could feel it in the way supplies had been stockpiling for months, in the way every beach drill had gotten more urgent, more realistic, more brutal. Daniel's tentmate, Corporal Jimmy Hendricks from Baltimore, was sharpening his trench knife with rhythmic scrapes of whetstone on steel. The sound set Daniel's teeth on edge. "You gonna wear those letters out before we even ship?" Jimmy said without looking up. "What's she saying that's so important you gotta read it 50 times a day?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes traced Margaret's words again, words about their daughter Lucy's first tooth, about the Victory Garden that was finally producing tomatoes, about how Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down had gotten a telegram and hadn't left her house in 3 days. "She says she's proud of me," Daniel said quietly. "She tells Lucy every night that her daddy's keeping the world safe." Jimmy's hands are still on the knife. "That's good, man. That's really good." "Is it?" Daniel looked up. "I haven't even done anything yet. What if I freeze up? What if I'm not—" "Hey!" Jimmy's voice cut sharp through the doubt. "You remember why we're here? You remember what those sons of bitches have done across Europe? Your girl Lucy, she deserves to grow up in a world where that evil got stopped. That's what Margaret's proud of, not what you've done yet. What you're willing to do." Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. He folded the letters carefully and slid them into the waterproof pouch he'd bought from a merchant in Portsmouth. 3 letters. 3 lifelines to everything that mattered. He'd carry them across the channel. He'd carry them through whatever hell waited on those beaches. He had no way of knowing the letters he'd written in return, 17 of them, sealed and addressed and dropped in the company mailbag just 2 days ago, would never make it home. June 5, 1944. 2300 hours. The LST landing ship tank groaned like a dying whale as it cut through the channel's black water. Daniel stood pressed shoulder to shoulder with 60 other men in the hold, the air thick with diesel fumes and vomit. The ship pitched and rolled, and every few minutes another man would lurch to the side to heave into a bucket that had long since overflowed. Daniel kept one hand pressed against the waterproof pouch inside his field jacket. The letters crinkled under his palm, real, solid, proof that somewhere across this churning darkness there was a yellow house in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where Margaret was probably putting Lucy to bed, singing that lullaby about mockingbirds and diamond rings. "Listen up." Sergeant Kowalski's voice boomed over the engine noise. He stood near the forward bulkhead, his face carved from granite in the dim red combat lighting. "The weather delayed us 24 hours, but we're going in tomorrow morning. H hour is 0630. We hit Omaha Beach, Dog Green sector." Dog Green. Daniel had studied the maps so many times. He could see them with his eyes closed, a stretch of beach overlooked by cliffs and concrete bunkers. In the briefings, the officers had drawn neat arrows showing how easy it would be. Artillery would soften the defenses. Bombers would crater the pillboxes. By the time the infantry landed, Jerry would be too stunned to fight back. But Daniel had been in the army long enough to know that plans drawn on maps by men in warm rooms rarely survived contact with reality. "First wave hits at 0630, Kowalski continued. "We're wave 2, 0645, 15 minutes after them. We push inland, secure the draw, link up with the Rangers at Point du Hoc. Simple." Nothing about tomorrow would be simple. Jimmy leaned close to Daniel's ear. You got your letters? Yeah. Good. Think about these letters when we hit the beach. Think about going home to read 100 more. Daniel nodded, but his throat had gone tight. He'd written 17 letters in the past 3 weeks. Long ones. Letters where he'd tried to put into words how much Margaret meant to him, how he'd memorized every freckle on Lucy's nose from the photograph he carried, how he dreamed about teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle and fish for trout in Yellow Breeches Creek. He'd told Margaret things in those letters he'd never been able to say face to face. About how scared he was. About how proud he was to serve. About how he prayed every night that Lucy would grow up never knowing the sound of artillery or the smell of burning cities. The LST's engine pitch changed. They were getting close. Daniel pulled out the waterproof pouch one more time, checking that the seal was tight. Margaret's letters are safe inside. As long as he had these, he had something to fight for, something to survive for. Around him, men checked their rifles for the 100th time, fixed bayonets, adjusted helmets and adjusted them again, because there was nothing else to do with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. 30 minutes, someone shouted. The ship's hold fell silent except for the engine and the waves and the sound of 60 men trying not to think about what came next. Daniel pressed his palm against the letters one more time. Then he checked his M1 Garand, made sure the clip was seated properly, and tried to remember how to breathe. June 6, 1944. 6:47 hours. The ramp dropped, and hell opened its mouth. Daniel had thought he understood what combat would be like. The training, the films, the briefings, none of it had prepared him for the wall of sound that hit when the LCVP's ramp splashed into the surf. Machine gun fire cracked through the air like the world's largest zipper being torn open. Artillery shells screamed overhead and detonated in geysers of sand and salt water. Men were shouting, screaming, praying, dying. "Move, move, move!" Sergeant Kowalski was the first off the ramp, and the sea took him immediately 60 pounds of equipment, pulling him under the pink-tinged surf. Daniel plunged into chest-deep water that was so cold it drove the air from his lungs. The current pulled at him. His boots found sand, lost it, found it again. Beside him, Jimmy struggled forward, holding his rifle above his head. The beach was 400 yards away. 400 yards that looked like the surface of an alien planet, cratered, smoking, littered with obstacles and bodies and pieces of equipment. The first wave hadn't cleared the defenses. They'd barely made it out of the water. A machine gun nest on the bluff zeroed in on their landing craft. Bullets churned the water into foam. Daniel saw Private Miller, a kid from Iowa, who'd shown everyone pictures of his baby son just last night, jerk backward and slip beneath the waves without a sound. "Keep moving!" someone screamed. "Don't bunch up!" Daniel forced his legs to pump. The water pulled at him like hands, trying to drag him down, to join the men already drowning in the shallows. His lungs burned. His pack felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The letters in his jacket pressed against his chest, a small, hard lump right over his heart. Think about the letters. Think about Margaret. Think about getting home. An explosion to his left threw up a column of water and sand that rained down like hail. Daniel's ears rang. He couldn't hear the gunfire anymore, just a high-pitched whine and his own ragged breathing. The water grew shallower. His boots were found on the sand. 50 yards to the shingle, the bank of stones that offered the first cover. Bodies lay scattered like driftwood in the surf zone. Some moved weakly. Most didn't move at all. Daniel ran in a low crouch, weapon ready, eyes scanning for threats. A mortar round hit 20 feet to his right. The concussion knocked him sideways. He sprawled in the wet sand, tasted blood and salt water, felt the letters press against his ribs. Margaret, Lucy, home. He pushed himself up and ran. Jimmy made it to the shingle first. Daniel threw himself down beside him, gasping, shaking. Around them, the remnants of their company, maybe 30 men out of the 60 who'd been in the landing craft, found what cover they could behind the stones. "We gotta move inland," Jimmy shouted over the chaos. "We sit here, we're dead." But moving inland meant crossing 200 yards of open beach under direct fire from bunkers they couldn't destroy. The Bangalore torpedoes and satchel charges that were supposed to clear the wire obstacles had gone down with the engineers in the first wave. Daniel's hands shook as he checked his rifle. Salt water had gotten into the mechanism despite his efforts to keep it dry. He worked the bolt, cleared it, chambered around. A runner came sliding down behind the shingle, his face white with shock. "Lieutenant's dead. Sergeant Kowalski's dead. We got nobody. Then we go ourselves." Jimmy was already moving, crawling along the shingle toward where a small draw cut into the bluff. "That's our objective. We take that draw or we die on this beach." Daniel followed because there was nothing else to do. Behind them, more landing craft were hitting the beach, disgorging more men into the meat grinder. The tide was coming in, and it was bringing the bodies with it. They crawled, they ran. They threw themselves flat when machine guns opened up and crawled again when the firing shifted. Daniel lost track of time. It might have been minutes or hours. All he knew was that his world had shrunk to the next bit of cover, the next yard of sand, the next breath. A shell hit close, close enough that he felt the heat and pressure slam into him like a physical thing. His helmet flew off. Something hot and sharp tore through his left shoulder. He hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up with blood streaming down his arm. The letters. His hand went immediately to his chest. Still there, still safe. He kept moving. 9:15 hours. They'd been fighting for nearly 3 hours, and Daniel had stopped counting how many men they'd lost. What was left of Easy Company, maybe 15 soldiers, had managed to reach the base of the bluff, where a narrow ravine offered the only route inland. The ravine was a killing ground. A single German machine gun nest commanded the entire approach, and every attempt to rush it had ended in blood and screaming. Daniel crouched behind a chunk of concrete that had once been part of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. His shoulder burned where shrapnel had torn through the muscle. He'd managed to wrap it with a bandage torn from someone's aid kit, but blood was seeping through the gauze. Jimmy was beside him, face blackened with smoke and sand. "We can't stay here. We can't get up there either." Daniel's voice came out harsh and raw. "Then we de here, or we de trying." Jimmy's eyes were wild but determined. "I didn't cross that ocean to drown in this goddamn ditch." From somewhere up the bluff, the machine gun rattled another burst. Bullets sparked off the concrete near Daniel's head. He flinched, pressed tighter against the rubble. His hand found the waterproof pouch again. The letters. Margaret's handwriting. Lucy's first tooth. The Victory Garden. All of it was waiting for him across the ocean, in a world that seemed impossibly far away from this nightmare of sand and blood. "I got a daughter," Daniel said suddenly. "Lucy, she's 18 months old. I've got letters from my wife telling me about her, about how she's growing, about her first words." Jimmy looked at him. "Then you better make damn sure you get home to see her second words too." A corporal Daniel didn't know came sliding into their position. "We got a Browning set up on the right flank. They're gonna suppress that nest. When they open up, we go. Everybody goes. It's now or never." Daniel checked his rifle one more time. 6 rounds left in the clip. He had 2 more clips in his bandolier, if he could reach them. The letters pressed against his chest like a talisman. The Browning. .30 caliber machine gun opened up with a sound like canvas tearing. Tracers arced up toward the German position. The enemy gun fell silent, temporarily suppressed. "Now, go, go, go!" Daniel ran. His legs felt like they were moving through mud. The ravine was steep, the footing treacherous with loose stones and shell craters. Men climbed beside him, above him, below him. The German gun came back to life, spitting fire. Someone screamed and tumbled backward, rolling down the slope in a tangle of limbs and equipment. Daniel clawed at the dirt, pulling himself upward. His wounded shoulder shrieked with every movement. Blood ran down his arm, making his grip slippery. He kept climbing. Grenades flew up toward the bunker. Explosions, smoke. The machine gun fell silent. They were at the top of the bluff, gasping, bleeding, half-deaf. But they'd made it off the beach. Daniel collapsed in a shell crater. every muscle trembling. Around him, the survivors of Easy. Company 9 men now. Just 9 out of 60 took stock of their ammunition and their wounds, and the fact that they were somehow still alive. Jimmy was there, grinning despite the blood running from a cut above his eye. We made it. Jesus Christ, we actually made it. Daniel's hand went to his chest. The letters. He pulled out the waterproof pouch with shaking fingers. The seal had held. Margaret's words were safe. But even as relief flooded through him, a cold realization settled in his gut. The mail bag. The bag with his 17 letters to Margaret. He'd seen it on the deck of the LST just before they'd loaded into the LCVP. He'd seen it sitting there with hundreds of other letters from hundreds of other men, all of them writing home one last time before the invasion. What were the odds that the mail bag had made it off the ship? What were the odds it hadn't gone down in the channel, or burned when a shell hit the transport, or simply been forgotten in the chaos? His letters to Margaret, all his words about love and fear and hope and coming home, might already be at the bottom of the English Channel, sodden and unreadable and gone forever. The thought made something crack inside Daniel's chest. June 8, 1944. They'd pushed 2 miles inland. The company, or what was left of it, had dug in around a small village whose name Daniel couldn't pronounce. The fighting had been constant, house to house, hedge to hedge. The bocage country of Normandy was a defender's paradise, every field a fortress, every stone wall a potential death trap. Daniel sat in a foxhole as rain began to fall. His shoulder throbbed, despite the morphine the medic had given him. Around him, the night was alive with distant gunfire and the occasional scream of artillery passing overhead. He'd taken out the letters again. In the fading light, he read Margaret's words one more time. Lucy asked where Dada was. I showed her your picture, and she kissed it. She doesn't understand why you're gone. But she knows you're important. She knows you matter. Daniel, whatever happens over there, know that you've already given us the world. You've given Lucy a father she can be proud of. Tears cut clean tracks through the dirt on Daniel's face. He didn't wipe them away. Hey. Jimmy dropped into the foxhole beside him. You okay? My letters, Daniel said. The ones I wrote to Margaret. 17 letters. I put everything into them, Jimmy. Everything I couldn't say to her face. Everything I wanted Lucy to know about her dad if I didn't. His voice broke. They probably made it, Jimmy said, but his tone wasn't convincing. They didn't. Daniel knew it with cold certainty. That mailbag never got off the LST. I saw it sitting on the deck. I saw it right before we went over. And then everything went to hell. And you know what happens to mailbags when ships are getting shelled. Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. Rain pattered on their helmets. So write new ones, he said finally. War's not over. You'll have time. But it wouldn't be the same. Those 17 letters had been written by a man who didn't yet know what this beach would cost, what this war would demand. He'd been able to write with hope then, with the naive belief that courage and good intentions would somehow be enough. Now he knew better. She'll never know what I wanted to tell her, Daniel whispered, about how much I love her, about how I'm sorry for every time I was too tired or too distracted to really see her, about how every good thing I ever did or ever will do is because she believed in me. Then you make damn sure you survive to tell her in person. Jimmy's voice was hard. You hear me? You carry those letters she wrote you, and you use them to get home. And when you do, you tell her everything, face to face, the way it's supposed to be. Daniel nodded slowly. He carefully folded Margaret's letters and returned them to the waterproof pouch. His lifeline. His reminder of what waited across the ocean. Somewhere in Normandy's dark countryside, artillery rumbled like distant thunder. Somewhere back in England, mailbags were being sorted and routed, and 17 letters that should have been among them were missing. Lost. Gone. But Daniel Reeves wasn't gone. Not yet. He checked his rifle, settled in for watch, and tried not to think about all the words Margaret would never read. Instead, he thought about the words he'd say to her when he got home. If he got home, when he got home, he'd make it home. He had to. Because there were things that needed to be said. And some messages were too important to trust to paper and ink and the chaos of war. Some messages had to be delivered in person, or not at all. November 1944. Margaret Reeves stood in the kitchen of the Yellow House in Harrisburg, watching Lucy toddle across the linoleum with her arms spread wide for balance. I am nearly 2 years old now, talking in full sentences. Growing up so fast. The mail had come that morning, bills, a letter from Margaret's sister in Ohio, and a telegram the kind every military wife dreaded. But it wasn't a death notice. It was a notice that Private First Class Daniel Reeves had been wounded in action in France. Shoulder wound, recovering in a field hospital, expected to return to duty within 6 weeks, wounded, but alive. Alive. Margaret had cried for an hour. Relief and fear and love all mixed together until she couldn't tell which emotion was which. Lucy tugged at her skirt. "Mama, Dada." "Soon, baby," Margaret whispered. "Dada's coming home soon." What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Daniel had written her 17 letters before the invasion. Long, beautiful letters full of love and fear and hope. Letters that would have told her everything he felt but couldn't say. Those letters had gone down with LST-507 when a German E-boat torpedoed it during a training exercise 2 days before D-Day. 327 men had died. Countless bags of mail had been lost. Margaret would never read Daniel's words about Lucy's smile or the Victory Garden or the future he dreamed of. She would never know about the specific shade of fear he'd felt, or the precise way he loved her, or the poems he'd tried to write in the cold English nights. But 9 months later, when Daniel finally made it home, wounded, scarred, changed in ways that would take years to understand, he would sit with her on the porch of that Yellow House. Lucy would be asleep upstairs. The cicadas would be singing. And he would tell her everything. The letters that never reached Normandy didn't matter in the end. Because Daniel carried the most important message home himself. Some things are too precious to trust on paper. Some things require a human voice and human hands, and the knowledge that both speaker and listener survived the darkness together. Daniel came home. He told Margaret everything. And in the years that followed, they built a life that was its own kind of letter, a long, patient message to the future about love and survival and second chances. The 17 lost letters dissolved into Atlantic water, ink running, paper pulping, words disappearing into the cold and the dark. But the man who wrote them made it home. And that was the only message that truly mattered.